All right, everybody. Welcome. I think I just heard Discord, but welcome back to episode 5 for the Crawl Walk Run show. It kind of feels weird because I haven't done a solo show in a few weeks, a few weeks. But yeah, I kind of want to get to a question that I've been getting a lot. I mean, I always get this question, but I've been getting it a lot lately as well. And I feel kind of bad because I know some people have been reaching out asking about like advice about getting jobs and trying to get their first job, especially if you just graduated from a boot camp. Um, and so it's been hard for me to kind of like get back to people individually, but I was thinking like maybe this would be helpful. And so I was just kind of sitting down and thinking about a few useful tips that I think I have seen be helpful for people, but also, things that you may or may not actually have heard somebody talk about before, and how you can leverage some of these different ideas for, trying to get that first job. So, again, if you haven't been joining on any of the shows, I'm Jessica, and my background is in software development, of course, but I actually got started back in. I always have to pull up GitHub. I feel like to even know exactly when I started, but I started around 2014, 2015ish, something like that. And at first I was like self-taught and I was freelancing. And then I went and took a back end boot camp. And then that's when I got into like my, more formal software engineering roles where I work for different companies. And that kinda took me on my journey, but I've also always almost always pretty much been teaching as a part of that journey, and, that's one thing I'm gonna get into, but that plays a huge factor because not only was I, like, solidifying my skills, but, I didn't realize how much credibility, that type of those type of opportunities kinda built up for me over the years. So, looking back on it, there's even some things that I realized helped me out a lot when I was trying to get my first job, or even first few jobs. And I'm just gonna share those today. So I tried to be like structured with it. So I came up with 10 topics to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about all of those, and hopefully those, like I said, this advice would be useful, especially because I hear a lot from people who are just graduating from their boot camp. And now you could take it with a grain of salt that, let's see, I took a boot camp back in 2016, I want to say is when I graduated. Hold on, I'm kinda paranoid about the audio. Okay, I really just wanted to make sure that the audio is working good. Okay, so anyways, yeah, I took a boot camp back in, like, 2016, I think, and, it's been a while, and I know that the market is pretty interesting right now as well, especially for me being a person that always kinda looked towards the tech field in particular. um and just like there's a lot of flux going on in the in the job market. So again, these are things that I have seen to be helpful as much as I could. I thought about things that are very generic and should be able to stand the test of time, but um, you know, I understand that there's a lot more nuance to it than it was when I was going through my program. Although I will say one interesting thing about what's different now versus when I was going through a program is that it was actually less common to be a boot camp grad, or even like self-taught and then trying to get your job. Like there was definitely people that were doing that, but this was when I took a boot camp, it was still very early on in coding boot camps overall, and whether they were, a legitimate method for people, whether companies would actually hire boot camp grads. So, although I would say the market was pretty nice as far as different job opportunities, you definitely had that hurdle of people being like, "We want a computer science grad." So, that was a little bit more what was going on back in the industry at the time that I got started. So anywho, yeah, okay, so I came up with 10 just to, round out the list, but I think there's obviously other things that you can get into. Um, but, one of the things is I do wanna say if you are already in a boot camp right now and you, like, haven't graduated yet, the first thing I think I talked about this already, but I always tell my students, like, "You need to start your portfolio." Like, you need to start your portfolio early in the boot camp. And I thought about it, and I will do another episode where I can talk about like how to vet boot camps and red flags when it comes to signing up for a program, different types of programs, because there are every program is not created equally, and that's unfortunate. But that's something that I've realized over the years. I've heard horror stories from people in their different programs. So yeah, if you are in your program right now, like you have to start earlier than you think. I think that's one of the main drawbacks that a lot of people might not realize. And especially when you're getting into a boot camp and you're like, okay, maybe I have 3 months, 6 months, however long your program is going to be, and you're still new to it. So, it's obvious. I mean, I understand why you might not realize that how early you should be starting and kind of looking into the job market, but I would hope that you actually probably took a look at what, the job market was looking like before you decided to go into your program. So with that being said, the biggest thing that I don't see my students doing that I think everybody should be doing early on is starting your portfolio. Okay? Especially because if you're like in web development or something like that, like front end, anything front end heavy, people expect to see. They expect to see, right, a tangible product that you like what your skills are like. Um and I know it can be very overwhelming. Don't get me wrong. I know it can be very overwhelming to have all your different, projects that you have to do every day. You're learning a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. Any program, and I'm going to give my personal opinions, right, on behalf of myself, but any programs that's worth their weight should absolutely have like some type of a career development like component to your program. And specifically, a really good program that has a good career development component, they're going to be on you as you are going through the program. It's not going to just be, oh, it's all technical, it's all coding. No, any program that actually really is invested in, or I'm not going to say any, but a lot of programs, when they are really truly invested in your outcome, making sure that you land whatever type of job you're looking for, they will already understand that it's certain things that you won't know to do, and there's certain things that you won't remember to do, or certain things that you won't prioritize when it comes to the job search. So they should actually be you should have some structured components in your program. But if you don't, some things to consider is first of all, you usually know that you have to set your GitHub up like way at the beginning, because most of the time you're going to learn how to use version control. But I was able to do some talks recently. I think I might put the whole talk up, or I want to make a video around it, because I did a talk at our Girl Development event. But the whole thing was, yes, we have our code on GitHub, but there's a lot of components to the GitHub profile that you can leverage when it comes to building out your portfolio. And I'm going to say that number one is definitely going to be polishing up your portfolio. So that's regardless of whether you are currently in the program or if you graduated from the program already. Portfolio is like number one, because this is your proof, right? This is your social proof. This is your technical proof that you know what you're doing. And when it comes to thinking about your portfolio, if you start early on, you won't have a lot of work on the back end to do. And that's why I always tell people to start early. And you really need to be looking at job opportunities and even maybe submitting like your resume and things prior to your program ending. I know, at least in my experience, that was the I'm not gonna say best option, but that was very successful, right? Like by the time you're, 2/3 of the way through your program, you should already have like applied to some jobs and stuff. And if you think about it, I know not everyone necessarily went to a university, um, but when it comes to like, say, even if I'm a computer science grad, right? I need to stop and start applying to jobs before I get my diploma, like before I walk across the stage. Otherwise, I won't already have a job lined up after graduation, right? And I feel like in the university, they kind of teach that mindset, and the recruiting calendar kind of teaches that mindset, like the typical company recruiting calendar for universities. But it can be, that can be something that people don't take much notice to or really realize is a strategy. So, if you didn't start looking for a job until like after your program was over, that's okay, but, just understand that it takes time, right? And that's, one of the things that you wanna keep in mind. So that's another reason why I've seen, other programs in different programs where they start you kinda looking early, and starting to get everything ready early. Along the way, they will usually be helping you understand how to create your LinkedIn profile, how to polish up your LinkedIn profile, um but I just think that the portfolio gets overlooked so much. And I guess the main thing I want to harp on before I just move on from this, because I don't want to like be be the dead horse or whatever, but it's just that you have all the different projects in your boot camp as you go along, right? So if you start your portfolio early, and it does not have to be anything complicated. Like I feel like people are like, oh, they want it to look so fancy. And when you're early on, you don't have a lot of skills yet to kind of build the portfolio you might envision. But that's okay, because you still have opportunities to kind of like clean it up and make it look nicer. But just getting all of your work into your portfolio and making sure you have a structured, like dedicated space to show off your work, that will, like, if you do that a little bit at a time as you go along, it will not be so daunting on the back end. But I know it can be super daunting when you get to the end of the program. And now it's like, okay, build a portfolio. And you're tired, you've been working so hard for like 3 to 6 months straight. Yeah, so do yourself a favor. If you are in the program, start your portfolio early. You can always change how it looks, but at least have the basics of, who you are, all the information you want to have set up somewhere for your actual pages, or projects to live. And then, as you go along, you can kind of build those out. So for me, um, early on, I I will always use GitHub Pages. I think I always use GitHub Pages for the most part to deploy my front end projects, and I will always use GitHub Pages. I would just have a little page set up, and then I had a WordPress blog back like towards the beginning, um, and I ended up switching to WordPress because I realized it was like not not my goal at all to be spending all my time trying to like you know build my portfolio from the ground up. That was my personal choice, right? I felt like the most important thing was I do have projects that I built and I want those to be out there. So I had a WordPress blog, and I made it look nice and everything. I had custom themes and stuff, but I just was like I had got out of the whole like, yeah, let me write my whole website from scratch mindset. So I had all of that set up, and then I had a page that was literally just said portfolio. That's it. And then every time I have a new project that I worked on, I would deploy it to GitHub Pages, and then I would maybe take a screenshot of it, depending on what it is. Um, and then so that way on my portfolio, I can add in a screenshot. I can add in a link to the live version of the site, and then I could add my link to the GitHub repository directly. So I just had those three things for each of my projects. And in the beginning, they started out really small, right? Like, here is how I built a specific type of animation. But as I got further and further along, then I could swap out some of the small stuff for the big stuff. And I could just kind of reorganize as I go. So that's a lot for that one specific thing, but it's just like that's the one thing that I feel like a lot of people kind of gloss over, and it comes back to bite you in the end because you need your portfolio if you want to get a job. That's like 99% of the time you're not going to be able to get a job without showing the portfolio. Um, but so the portfolio is number one, polishing up your portfolio. Oh, I was gonna say one last thing is if you are graduated from your boot camp already, your GitHub profile should not go dark. Like if you still have other projects, you still have other things that you never probably got to, you're still learning, you're literally in the beginning. So it is kind of a red flag if someone goes to a boot camp, they graduate from the boot camp, and then all of a sudden their whole like activity just completely drops off on GitHub, and also you're not working a job. So just keep that in mind. But the second thing would be networking. Now this is another thing that I think is completely underrated because when it comes to networking, you have to think about a lot of different perspectives, right? So, of course, we have LinkedIn, which you should be taking advantage of LinkedIn, but getting to know other people that are already working in the industry, people that have similar roles, people at companies that you're interested in working in. Um, and now that we are post, kind of sort of post, our shut down world, so to speak, like there's a lot more opportunities to start getting back in person, going to conferences and things like that. We had Meetup. Like Meetup got really, really popular around the same time that I was coming into programming. So for me, Meetup was really perfect because I used to go to like all the meetups, like anything that I was like slightly interested in, I will always go to those meetups. And I'll talk about this in another one, but I also became an organizer of a meetup. So even as I was, early on, I was known for being a tech person, even when I was first getting started. So yeah, that networking is crucial. Now, one thing that's really nice about networking, I would say, is however you want to look at it, it's kind of sometimes it's not a what you know, it's a who you know, and that's just the reality of it. And it's not to say that people just because you know somebody or just because somebody knew a person at the company that automatically makes them a shoo-in. No, but it makes it a lot easier to get past the screening process when you're just throwing your resume in a bucket or an ocean, so to speak, of a bunch of other people, and you're just kind of getting compared by bullet points. So, referrals are important. I didn't really understand the importance of a referral program until I actually worked for a company that had a referral program. And that's when I learned like some companies that do have referrals, like there can be an incentive for the person who refers you if you actually do get hired, right? So, yeah, people do have some like an individual engineer might have the incentive to actually submit your resume directly. And sometimes people, companies are looking for those direct recommendations because in a way it kind of helps them not have to think so much about the, like I said, comparing bullet points, because you have an actual person who can kind of, especially if you know that person or you work with them, they can speak to your skill set and things like that. At least it's like if you're into sales or marketing, it's kind of like it's a warm lead because a lot of times when companies are recruiting, they might be recruiting for jobs, and but they're looking for maybe specific skill sets, or they want to kind of branch out or whatever it is, and they might be getting hundreds of applications but still not getting the people that they're necessarily looking for. So referrals are one of the ways um that usually you can kind of, it's, I'm not going to say completely bypass the system because I've everybody's process can work differently. I just know in my experience, like when I was working on hiring at one of my companies, I was a software engineer for a couple years. It was like we actually looked at resumes. Um pretty regularly, maybe a couple times a week, maybe once a week, depending on how busy it was. But we had a group of people that looked at resumes. And it's like when you're comparing a resume, it's just like you don't really get that much time and you don't really know the person. It's not like you're gonna go on a deep dive and search every single profile that you provide for every person that applies to a job. It's not really practical. But so, we would just have to kind of make our best judgment when we were going through the first round just to see like, okay, does it seem like a person with the skill set that we're looking for, blah, blah, blah. And then if you got past that process, then you would go to the hiring manager for like a first interview. Um, but we had basically it was set up where like if you referred somebody, if you were a referral candidate, then you're not going to go through the first screen. You're going to automatically skip to the having a interview with the hiring manager, which is whoever is that specific team. So it's not trying to go into the nitty-gritty details, but um those referrals can make a big difference because you can go from being a person that's just kind of like it's hard to really tell, even if you have an amazing resume and you have 1,000 of them that you're up against, versus going straight to talking to the person who's going to be hiring for their team, and them being able to consider you as an individual versus those bullet points. So yeah, there's a lot to networking. And again, when you're in a program, if that is a to me, if it's a good program, they're going to have grads, right? They're going to have previous companies that has hired from, their graduates, and they're going to have alumni basically that work in different companies. So those are, akin to your your university alumni, right? Those are people that you could potentially reach out to. You can get information about the different roles that they might have at their companies, and just kind of take it from there. So that's the second tip that I would definitely give anybody that is trying to get their job, especially your first job. Let's see. Okay, so the third thing is the bootcamp resources overall. So, like I said, alumni networks and previous companies that have hired from the bootcamp, other, maybe like they might have partnerships. Like, for example, one of the programs that when I was in my bootcamp, that program actually had like specific companies who would send developers to like come work with us during office hours and stuff like that. So there was a lot of opportunities there. They had mock interviews, mock technical and mock behavioral interviews for us. And they gave us feedback on our interviews. They had job placement assistance as well. So, um, they were actually actively, the boot camp itself was actively, engaging different companies, trying to find out if, like just see if their company would be interested in folks that are coming out of the program. They will also talk to those companies to see what are the specific skills and kind of make sure that the curriculum was up to par with what the industry is looking for, things like that. So if you see a boot camp and they don't have any type of like job assistance, and you're paying like, you know, uh 10, 20, 30. I don't even know how much a boot camp is nowadays. 20,000 for a boot camp. And they don't have like career services. That's not a good investment. Because it can be challenging and they should know the market. They should be able to help you through that process. So the fourth thing I would say is just researching the employers that you're interested in. And one thing that I wanted to remember is or I didn't want to forget this part, but I was thinking about this. Sometimes people don't realize like there's apprenticeships, there's internships, and I hope that internships won't turn the idea of an internship wouldn't turn a lot of people off because usually especially like different technical internships I've seen, they're just as rewarding. A lot of times you still make good money just coming in as an intern, not necessarily being like, oh, working a free internship, or a non-paid internship, but getting paid and being able to train as you're going along, and then just having that kind of entryway opportunity into a company. So a lot of companies do have, internship programs, obviously, but also a lot of companies have apprenticeships, or they have like some type of entry level starter program. It's even some companies that actually have their own, technical boot camps and things like that. So um, in those cases, they might be interested in, making sure you have already the basic skills or a base set of skills that you should have gotten out of your boot camp, but then they want to, start you off with some type of specific technologies and tools that's, based on the work that they do in their particular company. So you can look into those different type of programs as well. I know for me, we used to have a fellowship. Fellowships are another option. We used to have a fellowship program here in Detroit called the Hacker Fellows. So I didn't do Hacker Fellows like straight out of my boot camp, but I did Hacker Fellows like alongside a lot of, typically it was like computer science grads that were going through that program, and it was just the opportunity for us to, like, if we got accepted into the fellowship, then we had support. We had specific companies that were interested in possibly working with a fellow that year. So we did like a matchmaking process, see like who's what mutual interests there were between the different fellows and the companies that were interested in participating that year. Then we went through interviews. Um, they actually hosted interviews for us, and then we did our, like, final follow-up interviews, kinda, like, self-managed, um, and that's how I got one of my, like, most favorite roles ever. So, fellowships might, some, like, startup fellowships or, computer science related, developer related fellowships might also exist as well. So you can kind of look into some of those when you are researching potential employers. And when you're looking at specific employers, make sure that you are tailoring your resume, your cover letter, if people even write cover letters anymore. Um, but make sure you're tailoring those specifically to the, job you're applying for. Like, I write cover letters because I only apply to jobs I'm really super interested in, you know? So, a lot of times I will it's not, even if it's not required, it's hardly ever required. I feel inclined to write, um, a cover letter because I usually am really, really, really gung ho about whatever it is, whatever that company is at the time, and I have some things I want to say so that they can really understand, who I am and why I care so much about working with that particular company. And that's how I am personally. So, as much as I let AI do a lot of stuff in my life, I do not let like I don't use like AI for my cover letters or anything like that, because that's a very, very personal statement to me. And I go out of my way to really address like my strengths, what I'm trying to bring to the role, why I'm so interested in the role. Um, and what might make me unique as well when it comes to the cover letter. And I'm hoping that like the person on the other side of it who reads it can actually, hear me as a person and not just, some robotic claims of why you should work for their company. So um I know a lot of times it can be a numbers game to some people where it's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna apply to, like, all these jobs." And then you're not really hearing anything back, but you should take into consideration that sometimes it can be more effective to, instead of just bulk, applying to a bunch of jobs, which you really can't do with the right level of, like, care and, detail as you can when you take a small group of companies you're really interested in, reach out to people that actually work there, find out a little bit, about what that company is into and how you can possibly, fit in. Um, and make sure it's a company that is going to suit the interest that you have. And then you can take the time to write those, have those personal conversations with folks, write those cover letters, see if you can get a referral from someone that you reached out to, things like that. So definitely that researching component is something that you want to give some time and effort and energy to. So let's see. This is number 5. Okay. I don't have to talk too deeply about this because I think a lot of people know this, but for number 5 is to practice your technical interviewing skills. So, um, there is a strategy and a structure to how you can approach solving your technical problems, whether you have online tests like, Leak Code or Hacker Rank or something like that, or whether you have to do like a live coding example, or whiteboarding or some form of whiteboarding, right? There's a lot of different scenarios, but there's specific things that, companies are usually looking at trying to figure out throughout that process. So, um, if you go to like the different coding, different sites that have like coding challenges. I think there's a lot of resources out there about tackling those. And even nowadays, there's a lot of resources about like what you should do, like in different like forms of interviews. If you have a data structures and algorithms interview, for example, like there's a specific kind of approach that you probably want to take in the actual technical material itself. But just in general, reviewing common questions, especially for your language, um, and reviewing those, like, that you need to be able to speak to, because it's one thing to do, like, a whiteboarding example or some type of coding example. It's another thing to be able to, like, intelligently speak about different topics in your industry, because even though you might understand it and you might, get the grasp of the concept, it's different when you have to articulate that, right? And you wanna sound confident and comfortable in your skills. So, not just practicing those like technical challenges, but making sure that you can speak to the different concepts. So I'll give you an example. You know, um, maybe it's less of example, more of like what I see a lot when I'm working with students. It's like I purposely try to have conversations where I use the terminology for, whatever topic or whatever project we're working on, especially if it's the end of the program, right? So when you are at the end of your boot camp, you should be able to use like the terminology of your language, right? If you should be able to say this is inheritance, if that's what it is, you should like understand how to describe the concepts and know like the actual terminology for them as well, because I know a lot of times like students they'll know how to make something and how to get it to work, but if I say like, oh, okay, how did you use inheritance here, even though they already have it implemented, they wouldn't be able to actually describe that back to me. Um and so that's really low hanging fruit, because it's like you already understand the technical concept, but make sure you feel comfortable to like just speak to those topics and not just be able to demonstrate them. Um, Number 6 is the soft skills. So that's obviously important as well. Like I said, when I did a boot camp, um, we did mock behavioral interviews, just to kind of make sure that we had more, skills around, being able to hold a conversation, being able to, kind of be approachable and be able to communicate effectively in the interview situation. And it always helps to practice the technical and the behavioral side of things, because, when the pressure is on, that it's only sometimes it only makes it, that much more difficult to, to stay calm and cool and collected. And especially when you have been going through a process of like just the angst that builds up, the anxiety that can build up when you're not getting, the opportunities that you're looking for. Yeah, you want to be as comfortable as possible when you go into those interviews, because you can make the most of your opportunity when you finally do get that seat at the table. And I would say this too. Make sure that you are interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you as well. Not saying be rude or dominate the conversation, because obviously, as a with an interview, they probably have a set um rubric that they want to cover, and that's okay. But you should also be interviewing your company. And I know it can be hard to say no to jobs as well. But yeah, you can save yourself some headache. um if you ever, like, I've worked at the wrong places before, wrong places for me anyways. And interviewing the company, making sure it's a good fit for you is definitely important as well. Gives you an opportunity to see if there's red flags, because honestly, as much as you might be looking to kind of land that first job, sometimes it's not that particular role is not worth it when it comes down to, you finding out what it's like once you're actually a member of the company. So I don't want to put too much of the emphasis on the company when you should be interviewing them as well. But those are things to keep in mind. Okay, so we have a few more. Um, let's see. Okay, not bad, not bad. I have a few more, and number 7 is it's more of a mindset thing, but definitely being persistent and staying positive is going to help you so much. When it comes to just kind of like surviving the job hunt, especially in that first go around. Now, I've just found that over time, the first job was the hardest one to get, but as soon as I had something on my resume, something on my LinkedIn portfolio, then I really don't like, I still might look for jobs, yes, but for the most part, I have a lot of different recruiters and opportunities that's just always kind of popping up for me. Um, and that really starts to accelerate after you already have, that first opportunity. So while you're kind of building yourself up to get in that first role, just, rejection is normal and that's okay. And not to take it too personal as well, because y- everybody's opportunity is going to come at a different time. So and if you do want to find the right job and something that really aligns with you, something that you is going to feel like, rewarding, fulfilling, is going to be, in your wheelhouse, so to speak, and give you the opportunities that you're looking for, you want to give that time, right? Um, so I just kind of want to encourage you, if you are still, in that mindset where it's like, okay, you're feeling the pressure of trying to find a job, um, you know, try not to think too much about the negative components. And another thing that you can think about when it comes to, even if you get, rejections from companies, those are still opportunities to, understand the process and get better at the process, because um interviewing is like a skill set, right? Like, you don't just a lot of people need practice in all different aspects of the interviewing process. So think about that. Even if you do have an opportunity that you do not, get accepted for, when you walk away from it, think about, I'm not saying beat yourself up or anything like that, but think about what you learned from the process, right? Like, so for me, it helps my anxiety considerably in the beginning when I first started to actually have interviews and do the technical interviews, because you never know, like, you can practice it, but it's nothing like really kind of like having it and being there in the moment. And I got better at that over time by understanding what the process was like and what they were looking for as a part of the process, right? So um it's still you should still be building skills, which actually can help you really land a job um ultimately. Now, let's see, we have 3 more. Okay, so this is, the last few are things that, I think are very helpful, were helpful for me, and these are more akin to, like I was mentioning before, just kinda like the idea of things that I didn't realize actually helped me, raise my professional status, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the credibility, right? It gave me a lot more credibility. So the first thing would be taking on leadership roles or like meetup organizer type opportunities. Now this is not necessary, like, all of these, none of these are necessarily for everybody, but these are special little ways that I stood out when I was first getting into the industry. And again, a lot of it is based on my own personal experience, but I think it's broad enough nowadays that you can possibly take one of these tips, no matter who you are. They suit a lot of different experience types and a lot of different comfort levels when it comes to like just public engagement in general. But like I said, number 8 is taking on leadership roles or like meetup organizer opportunities. And you'll be surprised, especially probably meetups. I try to leave the house nowadays. Um, but one of the organizations that I work with, Detroit Black Tech, or co-founded, right? We started out as a meetup. And now, we have our nonprofit status and things like that. But originally we were a meetup. And the Girl Develop It is another organization that I work with, and Girl Develop It originally, all of our chapters were meetup groups. And there was different user groups in my community depending on what languages or what frameworks you were using. Um, whether you were a front end or a mobile or back end or whatever the case may be. So it sometimes those meetup, especially the meetup organizer roles, are not the type, it's not as technical as you would think it is. Because it's all about being the organizer more so than necessarily being the expert. But it gives you an opportunity to really kind of like, take a take a lead role in your tech community and help move things forward. And so, even if you don't have a lot of experience as a developer, you still should be able to, get different speakers for your group. And if it's an existing group, then a lot of times you might probably have a few other organizers. And so it's kind of a opportunity of mentorship and support and things like that. So, looking into that, you could start just going to meetups, of course, like I said, and the networking and things. But um, that it's a volunteer role. It takes a lot of work a lot of times, and it's good when you have a team. And not as many people tend to kind of go towards like being the lead of a meetup or something like that. So, um, you can see if the organizers of like a meetup that you're interested in are actually looking for some additional help in taking on, some responsibilities. And that goes a long way. So I was that person that was at every meetup. I also was the person who was um, a lead for maybe two. I think I was a lead for two meetups for the most part, meetup groups. And then branching off from that, number 9 is creating a blog or speaking on technical topics. So when it comes to meetups are usually a nice place to start out just having like giving a small tech talk. Um, Depends on, getting to know the organizers, what they're looking for, and your comfort level. But especially if say like if you have a meetup that does like lightning talks or something like that, lightning talks is a good way to start. Usually lightning talks are like 5 minutes, 5 minute talks. A bunch of people do like 5 minute talks. And it gives you a entry point right into being able to talk about something specific. And you don't always have to be talking about something that you quote unquote are an expert at. A lot of times you can be talking about something that you have learned, maybe like, pitfalls or roadblocks that you might have run into and how you overcame them. It's a technical group. So think about those types of potential speaking engagements if it's something that's new to you, and if you really don't like speaking, or the idea of crowds, that's where blogs come in. And nowadays we have so many forms of the quote unquote blog. So like for me, I do like podcasting. It's very like it's very well suited for me. I'm like a live streamer, so that's what I tend to do. And I've just been trying to actually work my way more into some like longer standing um material, longer standing content. But that's my form of blogging really is like the live streams. And but you can go traditional, right? And just post different technical blogs, depending on the type of things you're learning and things of that nature. But this is where you are establishing yourself as a thought leader in your industry. And there's it's levels to it, right? And this is something that you are investing in for hopefully the foreseeable future, right? This is the path that you're going on. Um, as you invest in this type of work over time, the blogs, the tutorials, speaking at meetup events and things like that, it really helps with the credibility overall. And again, for me, these are a lot of these things are were first nature to me because I that's just the type of person that I am, but, I took it for granted. I didn't realize, like, how many of those specific, opportunities that I took to lead a group or specific opportunities that I took to, lead a workshop, those were adding up because it's something different. I don't know, it hit different, I guess, when people see you actually getting up and talking about it, even if they're not the technical ones, right? It's like I got more recruiters actually reaching out to me because I had like Girl Develop It and me being a TA and me being an instructor on my LinkedIn profile. Or a lot of people I met them at different meetup events and I was just the person organizing. I might not have even been the person teaching, but I was the person organizing. So again, it kind of starts to showcase you in that light as a leader in your industry, and that helps a lot in standing out because it's all about kind of standing out and not being in the weeds when you're trying to really get strategic about your job search. So I have one last one and I'm going to wrap it up for today. Actually, I'm going to be moving into my 100 days of code for today, or my 100 days of ML for today after I get done with these. But um, we did number 9. Okay, number 10 is along those similar it's along the similar vein, but the you can volunteer to teach or TA for intro classes. So there's a lot of different ways that this could look, but like I said, if you're around a meetup, especially any meetups that actually help people learn to code, if you're a bootcamp grad and there is like any kind of meetups to help people learn to code and they're coming in taking their very first HTML, very first CSS, class, very first JavaScript class or something like that, um, you should be really solid to start out at the very least as a TA, right? And being able to help people as they're learning that material. Now again, teaching and working with people to tutoring and things like that. It's not necessarily for everyone, but again, this is just another type of way that you could approach this. And again, for me, I have pretty much always taught the entire time I was in software. And um, it started out when I was a TA for Girl Develop It. It was like, well, you could TA, which is a volunteer role, but then whenever you would TA for a session, you would be able to take a free session. So when, my budget was real tight and I wanted to take other classes outside of like my boot camp and stuff, I started this before I went into boot camp. I would actually, like, sign up to TA a class, and then I would TA for, like, HTML, CSS, which is something I was comfortable with, and then I would use my free class on, like, a Java class. So, those were really, really, really helpful, things that I was doing early on. And then, of course, obviously, there's the component of teaching or whether it's like writing a blog or speaking, all of these kind of fall into that bucket. There's this component of being able to solidify your knowledge as well. Um is one thing to do it, it's another thing to, like I said, explain it back. So that's another benefit to it as well. And you hopefully you will be giving back as well. Now the boot camp that you like took classes from or graduated from, they might have like an intro coding series. A lot of them do, and I know in the past I've seen where a lot of those opportunities, they would allow like alumni to come in and teach those intro classes. So it was a good way to get started, or like a nonprofit or a meetup group that does teach coding classes. You can usually help out there. And even with kids, you can do like, dang, what's the one? I think it's like Day of Code or something like that. But there's different opportunities. So, um, I I would say overall, I probably did a combination of all these different things. Um, Throughout my initial run and, um, overall, I feel like these are, like, some of the standout tips that it really shouldn't matter what kinda industry you're in particular necessarily. These are more like opportunities to kind of really make sure you can stand out and get the, extra support that you need in order to kinda get that first job, so I hope this is helpful. Again, you want to look at polishing your portfolio, that's number 1. You want to look into networking, make sure you're getting to know people and looking for referral opportunities, opportunities with alumni from your program, etc. Number 3, making sure you leverage your boot camp's resources. And if you are considering looking at a boot camp, they should definitely have career resources for you, so take those resume reviews, mock interviews, um, find out any kind of job placement assistance they have, and make sure that you can take advantage of that and kind of speeding up the process. And then number 4 would be researching the potential employers. So get to know the employers that you're interested in. Make sure you're customizing your resume and your cover letter for that particular role that you're applying to, and also think about looking at whether those companies have apprenticeship programs or like new developer programs, internship programs, things like that. Number 5 is to practice your technical interviewing skills and make sure that you are looking at different ways of tackling the technical interview, whether it is going to be online coding challenges or, whiteboarding style interviews. Maybe you might pair program with someone, or if you know you're going to be having to do data structure and algorithm style interviews. Developing your soft skills is number 6, and that would be, just highlighting your communication strengths, making sure that you're honing those skills over your group projects and things of that nature, and that you are, a great person to work with in a professional environment. Number 7 is just being persistent and staying positive. It can be daunting and it's a lot of work, but that first job really, I think to me, the first job is the hardest one to get. And once you get the first one on your resume, it gets a lot easier. Because you kind of have that social proof, right? That you have been able to maintain a software role. So keep a positive mind. Try to take learning experiences from all of the steps in your interviewing process and really continue to iterate on those and incorporate those back in as you are going along in your interviewing process, right? Number 8 is taking leadership roles or meetup organizer opportunities. So when it comes to other ways that you can stand out, if any of these suits you, number 8, looking at meetup organizer, looking at a team that might be looking for extra organizer, looking at a meetup that you might be a part of that is closing. Whenever meetups are closing because nobody is maintaining it anymore, then the usually an automatic email goes out to everybody that's a part of that group that says, "Hey, do you want to step up and take over this group?" Um, so that might be an opportunity for you as well. Number 9 is blogging and speaking on technical topics. So if you're more of like to write and kind of maybe even quote unquote behind the scenes, then that is another opportunity for you. Um, or speaking at those meetup events. And then last but not least, just using volunteer opportunities to teach, TA, help other folks learn about programming and also solidify your skills as well. So I hope this was helpful. Not a little bit more detailed than I was hoping to get into. I kinda wanted it to be short and sweet, but, I think that these tips definitely can take you a long way. If there are other questions that you have or other issues that I can speak to in particular, feel free to reach out. Like, nowadays, people are either going to see these episodes on LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitch. So if you don't drop comments, during the show, you can also send me like direct messages and I'll try to respond that way. But this was one I was getting a lot lately and I just wanted to kind of answer it um to the group, to the community as a whole. And then like I'm happy to go into further details with you if you kind of like, like I said, have a specific case. But um if you have other ideas for other types of episodes that I can do, like I said, I definitely want to do probably the next then one of the next talks I'm gonna do will be like about um, but otherwise, yeah, let me know what kind of topics would be helpful. Of course, I have my list of things to kind of go into, but I'm trying to get the foundational things out of the way before we start talking a little bit more about what's a microservice and like, oh, I'm on call. What is pager duty? Like we can talk about some of those other um, the software engineering, product engineering, life struggles as well. So yeah, you can reach out to me and let me know, and I'll be happy to like include those in future episodes. So that's it for today. I'm going to be wrapping this episode up and then it's day 44 of my 100 days to 100 days of machine learning, 100 days of code. So I'm going to like end this stream and then I'll be starting back up on um Twitch and YouTube. Candyman said, just joined you and mentioned pager duty. Oh no, pager duty. Yeah, like I wanted to talk about what it's like to be on call, and different components of being on call because I have worked as a product engineer and being on call is like a whole lifestyle. If you never heard of pager duty is the app that we use that it allows you to get your notifications when one of your services that you're on call for is having basically an alarm. So yeah, I want to talk about that, but Candyman, I'm gonna be right back. Oh, I know. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna end this broadcast and I'm just gonna start back up. So if you are hanging around, I'll be right back in the chat. But otherwise, thank you again, everybody, for joining. I've really been enjoying this and I'm working on getting everything published out so you all can kind of like just follow the show wherever. But I love being able to do it live and I'm a live person. So that's my thing. But I'll see y'all on the next episode or I'll see you in the 100 Days of Code stream.